Okay guys, welcome back to that 1870s Homestead. My name's Rachel and we're doing our top five things to grow in the garden mini series brought to you every morning this week, and things to think about when you're planning your garden, and especially if you're new first-time gardeners. Welcome to the gardening community. And the last video I did were the top 5 things I would pick if I was planning a garden for the intention on saving myself money at the grocery store. And gave you guys a lot of ideas in that video of how I use products for versatility, how I preserve those products, things like that. Today's top 5 things will be all about what are those high yielding crops. Meaning you plant a single seed and you get a lot more, a big bang for your buck. And that equates to typically more things preserved and put up on your pantry shelves. So let's get right into it. There are going to be some repeats through this series, and that's just a case for the given crop that I'm talking about. It meets all of my categories across the board. So number 1 I'm going to put on this list is green beans. Green beans, specifically pole beans. You will plant one green bean and have green beans coming out the wazoo. So, and I do plant a lot of green beans, but pole beans, huge bang for your buck. Highly recommend it. You can fit a lot in a single square space, and so it doesn't, and because it grows up, it doesn't take a lot of gardening space out in your garden. Green beans, and then can it or blanch and freeze it, whatever your preserved method is for saving your green bean harvest. Second on the list, tried and true, we're going to go back to tomatoes. Tomatoes, again, you're planting a single seed and you get such a high yield. You can expect anywhere from 15 to 20 pounds, 25 pounds, maybe even 30 pounds per plant of tomatoes, depending on the variety that you're growing. And that's, of course, assuming a standard tomato, not something like a cherry tomato. But tomatoes, and I personally go for indeterminates versus determinate plants. Just so I can have the longest and most life out of that plant, but to each his own. So tomatoes, huge producer of produce, high return on your investment, and a lot of product going up in your pantry shelf, in your freezer for fresh eating all year long. So what would be next on those high yielding? For me, it would be cucumbers. And again, these are my choices. They may not be your choices. Cucumbers. High return on a single plant. A single plant, one seed is going to give you a lot of cucumbers. We use cucumbers in this house for a lot of pickles and relish. And if you've been with us for any length of time, you know I love my pickles. So I have to have pickles nearly daily in my life. And so a lot of pickles are needed. So I plant cucumbers, of course, every single year. So I make sure that we have all my pickle needs met. So that's green beans. This is a fun one. New garlic. And I should have put garlic on the last video, honestly, for saving yourself some money. And garlic is another one with a huge return. I mean, literally, you think about it. A standard clove of garlic, I think, is anywhere from around 8 cloves. 8 to 10 cloves in a head of garlic. And you plant a single clove and you get a whole garlic head, and in return, how great is that? And garlic doesn't take up a lot of space in the garden. So you plant break up 1 clove of garlic, and of course you'll have to do this in the fall if you're in the northern hardneck growing zones of garlic. I think softneck garlic down south you guys can plant in the spring, but garlic for if you just take a single head, right, and that has 8 or 10 cloves if you're lucky, that's 8 or 10 heads of garlic you get in return. And last I remember, garlic isn't that cheap at the grocery store. So we'll plant maybe 150 cloves of garlic and get 150 heads of garlic. And, one of our favorite ways to preserve that, because it'll store for a long time, but one of our favorite ways is just to break it up all the individual heads and put those cloves in a freezer bag and pull it out as needed. So garlic is another super high yielding crop to plant. So that's our top 4. Now my top 5 pick might be different from your top 5 picks. So I'm going to put like 3 little things to think about in that category. But again, this is really high yielding ideas that we have in our garden every single year. So your greens, whether that's your lettuce greens, your kale greens, mustard greens, really, if I had to pick, I'd probably say lettuce and kale. It's a lot of food that you can cut and come again. As long as it doesn't go bitter on you in the heat of the summer. But once it grows up, cut it back, it'll grow up again, cut it back, it'll grow up again, and you can just get so much. And then we have had kale reseed itself in the garden since we first planted, and I've never planted kale again. So that's something to consider too, and you can do that with lettuce as well. If you like where it's growing, let it go to the last bit of it. When it starts bolting in the summer, let it go to seed. It'll seed, it'll come back for you next year, and you don't have to plant it again. It's an amazing product to grow. The only thing other than kale, the only reason I personally wouldn't grow a ton of lettuce is because we only use that for fresh eating. We don't preserve our lettuce. Where kale, I'll freeze dry and then put it in soups and stews and quiches and things like that all season long. But something to think about if you're choosing one or the other. So those are my top 5 when it comes to bang for your buck return from a single seed. You get a high return and yield for your investment in the garden. What would be yours? Leave them in the comments below. You might spawn some of us to think of some other really fun, high-yielding crops. And I wish you guys all the best in your gardening season. And come back for the next round, which are going to be those dirty dozen. Ugh. Like if your goal is to really reduce the pesticides and chemicals coming into your body and your food, and yet the cost to mitigate that and buying organic in the store is overwhelming to you, what would be my top 5 picks to help you get away from that and get some control over clean, healthy food coming into your family's home? So I'll see you on that video next, coming up here shortly. Talk to you guys later.